Hello and welcome. My name is JDeg, and I figured we would kind of skip around to the cooler classes since, expansion's coming up soon. I figured I would kind of skip over Warlock. I don't think they have a very interesting set. And go to one of the classes that I've been really wanting to talk about and really excited for, which is Hunter. So Hunter is going to be sharing with Priest. Oh, sorry, Priest is going to be using Hunter cards, and then Hunter is going to be using Warrior cards, I should say. So, a lot of interesting things. I don't think that the synergy with Warrior is really high. I saw like maybe three cards I'm interested in, but one of them is very exciting to deck build around. You might see a little picture of it in this screen. But without further ado, let's move forward. I'm really excited. Hunter has a lot of options. First off, we got the enemy recasting spells, which I don't think really fit into Hunter. Let's just start off with the really obvious ones. We have Furious Fowls and Char. Furious Fowls summons 2/3/2 birds with immune that attack an enemy. I think this would have been actually pretty interesting if they were like 3/4s or if this was 5 mana. It's actually a pretty cool card. The issue is 6 mana is super expensive, and I'm never going to want to play this. And then Char deals 7 to a minion for 4 mana and gives a minion in my hand stats equal to the excess damage. This is way too expensive. It does nothing. We had Helm of Domination in Death Knight, which was subtracted 5/5 in stats and gave a minion +5/+5. And that card is way better in most scenarios, unless you're literally dealing 1 damage. And that card doesn't see any place. So I think that Char is pretty interesting if you kind of rework it, but I don't think it's going to be playable at all unless they rework it. And then we have the kind of more interesting ones, Death Roll and Chatty Macaw. So Death Roll is going to be 5 mana, destroy an enemy minion, deal damage equal to its attack, randomly split among all enemies, which is pretty interesting. It's an assassinate plus extra. And so the extra, the issue with it is that you have no idea how it's going to split up. So if they have two Molten Giants, you kill one Molten Giant, you can have 7 damage going to the other Molten Giant and one to their face, and then you might as well have just played an Assassinate, assuming that you don't have any other follow-up. So I think that Death Roll is interesting and has some scenarios where it's useful, particularly if your opponent has like what if your opponent has a single minion that has a lot of attack, then that all that damage can go to their face, and that's pretty interesting. But in a lot of scenarios, they can have a lot of little minions. There's going to be a lot of minions that don't get killed by that excess damage from Death Roll. Maybe they don't even have a high attack minion. And 5 mana is really expensive for Hunter. I just don't see it. Also, side note, does that alligator have, or crocodile, what, does he have 6 legs? I'm just now realizing it's weird. Okay. And the teeth are going through the boot. I don't know what's going on there. He has 6 legs. Okay, moving forward. Then we got Chatty Macaw, which is actually really interesting. It's a beast and pirate, 3 cost, 3/3, that repeats the last spell you cast at an enemy at a random enemy if possible. And so I need to clarify this card because I misread it. I thought it was just going to be recasted to any spell, and then if it happens to target an enemy, then it would target an enemy again, right? But no, it only recasts a spell if that spell targeted an enemy. So, if I play tracking, this is not going to recast tracking. If I play banana on my own minion, it's not going to replay the banana. If I play banana on an enemy, then it'll recast the banana on an enemy again. Right? So it's interesting with Death Roll and Fierce Fouls, but like I said, both of those cards are too expensive. And then if you look at all the other cards, there's not really anything that's actually interesting. There's like Quick Shot, which has been power crept out of the game a long time ago. There's Kill Command, which hasn't been good at all. Nor do I think this would be good to recast it. Half the time you're gonna hit a minion by accident, and then you're like, what the heck? Um, there is the Spell Hunter cards, but there's no other spell damage support, so I don't see it. I think that's something that's really interesting in Priest, and I think it's something interesting to think about moving forward with new expansions. But for now, I don't think there's any real support for it. Moving on, we have hand buff cards, and this is kind of where the warrior cards can pop in. And before I say anything, let me talk about the tourist. So that's going to be Ranger Gilly to use these warrior cards, I should say. And Warrior Ranger Gilly is going to say at the end of your turn, get a 2/3 Cocolisk as a 6 cost 4/6. 6 cost 4/6. It gets the 2/3 Crocolisk to your hand. You get a 2 mana River Crocolisk in your hand. It doesn't even summon it on the board. Death Rattle give all minions in your hand +2/+3. So this card is the slowest thing I've seen ever, maybe. It doesn't do anything on board the turn you play it. It doesn't have taunt. Um, it doesn't draw cards to help your hand buffs. It doesn't do it. It gives me a vanilla 2/3 Crocolisk. My opponent is just gonna not hit it, and then I'm gonna have to hope that I can trade it in. And if I don't, then I don't get any value that turn. It's terrible. I think Ranger Gilly is absolutely awful, and you only really want to play Gilly if you really, really, really want to hunt a warrior card. And so as we'll see, there's like maybe one warrior card that I really want, but everything else, nothing is spectacular. So we got Couple Muscle. That's our first warrior card. That 1 mana, give a minion in your hand +2/+1. And you got 3 drinks to use that. 3 uses of it. It's kind of interesting with Concierge. So if you guys don't remember what Concierge does, it's a neutral pirate. That's 3 cost 3/4. That makes cards from other classes cost 1 less, right? So you can play every single one of those custom Couple Muscles for free, which is pretty interesting. With the legendary that we'll show later, but the whole idea is you can go Concierge plus 3 Couple Muscles, repeat it with the Hunter legendary, and that'll give you another like 5 Couple Muscles in your hand to use for free, as well as do whatever you want. So that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of hand buff synergies with Hunter. Uh, so I think that there's some interesting applicabilities. It's also got spell support, so there are some Hunter cards that enjoy these 1 mana spells, especially Mantle Shaper, the 5/5 that gets discounted by 1 for each spell you play. And so that loves this card as well, similar to Bunch of Bananas. But I think the issue with a lot of these cards is like they're decent, but we have so many decent cards in Hunter that are all fighting to make into the list. So I gave Couple Muscle 3 stars in case there is some kind of hand buff deck that wants to use it, in case there's some kind of concierge deck that wants to abuse concierge. Um, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised just because you can top deck Gilly and you can give all those hand buffs to Gilly, and Gilly doesn't even care about the hand buffs. Gilly doesn't do anything with the hand buffs. There's just a whole bunch of anti synergies with that tourist. Then Line Cook, 3 cost 2/4 tradable taunt. When you draw this, get a copy. It's really interesting if you fully deck build around it, but I don't think that there's really enough there for Hunter to do with it. So I just gave it 1 star. Undercooked Calamari, 4 cost 3/4 battle cry. Destroy an enemy minion with attack less than or equal to this minion's and its beast. So pretty interesting. It kind of gets drawn by the buzzard 2 cost card of Hunter. Um, and the issue is it seems kind of slow. It just seems it's decent tempo, but if it doesn't really race, my opponent doesn't really pressure them, and so I don't love it. I think I was between a 2 and 3 star rating. Maybe if I'm running some other cards that make me want to run Warrior, then I can toss this in and not hate it. But like I said, there's a lot of good to decent cards in Hunter that are all fighting to make lists. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it popped in, but I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't make lists. And then Bird Watching, I'm actually really interested in this card. It's a 2 mana spell that discovers a minion from your deck and gives all copies of it +2/+1 wherever they are. Similar to Warsong Wrangler from back then. Issue is it doesn't tutor specifically beasts, it's just any minion in general, which can have its upsides and downsides. I think it's a pretty cool card. Lets you look for minions, and I think it's pretty powerful if you happen to have them already on the board. So I'm sure, like I said, a decent card that maybe fits in the list if you need that kind of effect. or maybe doesn't. And then we've got these kind of big warrior package that doesn't really have anything to do with Hunter at all. We've got the Rye Cleaver, which is Battle Cry and Death Rattle weapon for 7 mana, 4/2. That gets a slice of bread, and then you get the two slices of bread. Any minions in between get summoned for 2 mana once you've proc that Death Rattle, basically. It's actually a really interesting flavor. I love the card, but I don't think Hunter is the class. All of these cards are warrior cards, so I don't see why you would be doing this in Hunter unless you wanted to summon these big beasts that Hunter has. But like I said, I don't think that that's enough for Hunter to prefer doing this rather than Warrior. When Warrior is able to share cards with Druid and Ramp and has the AoE tools beforehand to use it. So I don't think Right Cleaver is great, but it does have some interesting applicabilities with some Hunter cards that could make it interesting. That I don't think it'll pan out though. Draconic Delicacy and Monstrosity, just these kind of big minions that you can summon. I think Draconic Delicacy is really interesting if you can get it to stick, and you're in some kind of control meta where you're allowed to actually play a big minion that only hits one card. So like I said, it's really interesting. It's hard to get rid of, but I don't think there's really a home for it right now. And Monstrosity, just a little bit too slow, just some stats. They kill the taunt, and then that's it. And then finally, Food Fight, uh, which summons a 0/6 entree for your opponent when it dies. Summon a minion from your deck. This is cool, but then you summon Ranger Gilly, and then you delete the deck. So I'm not really into it. I think this is more interesting in Hunter than it is for Warrior because you can actually play some like spells that give you minions, and then use those minions to kind of trade into this food fight. So there's that, but I think it's a little too slow. It takes a little bit too much energy and work to get this summon. And once again, I would just kind of prefer doing this in Warrior. Um, and then here's our 5-star card that actually makes me want to play Warrior cards. It's All You Can Eat. It's a 3 mana spell that draws 3 minions of different minion types, and this opens up a whole lot of deck building ideas for me. It's probably one of my favorite cards of the expansion, just for what it encourages me to do and looking at tribes of cards, seeing how like okay maybe this mech go pairs well with this beast when I draw them together, right? Um, and so I just kind of wanted to show off some of the synergies of things that aren't just beasts, because there's plenty of beasts in Hunter. But what other tribes are there that are interesting to draw? Well, there's Mantle Shaper, which would pair really well with something that encourages spells like Product 9 and Shadi Macaw, right? So you got a pirate, a mech, and an elemental or naga. Maybe a beast. There's a whole lot of interesting stuff you can do there. You can actually draw two Mantle Shapers. You can draw it as your elemental and as your naga, plus whatever beast you want. I think that was really interesting. There's an adaptive amalgam kind of deck that you can build, which sounds really interesting, and then you can use that amalgam to fill in any space. Hollow Hound as an undead, Yelling Yodeler if you want to play a Death Rattle deck. You can always consistently draw that combo piece. And Hollow Hound, if you want to play a hand buff deck that really needs that lifesteal effect, really wants to draw into the Hound to start buffing it, well, here's a tutor for it that also draws you some other stuff, right? So, like I said, I'm really excited for this card. I think it's an all-star. It makes me not feel absolutely terrible for running Gilly. Um, and so I can see if there's like an aggressive meta where like we Ranger Gilly is so bad that I don't even want to run this card. Because like I said, it is a pretty fair card. It's 3 mana, draw three with some deck building restrictions and having to run Gilly. But I think this is an absolutely it's a card that makes me understandably want to run Gilly without worrying about it too much, right? So I'm hoping it'll work out. I'm really excited for this card, and there's a whole lot of different possibilities for it. And then next up, we've got this kind of one cost and battle cries package, and I kind of tossed in the location there. But let me read the other three cards first. Like we got Trusty Fishing Rod, 3 cost 1/2 weapon that summons a 1 cost minion from my deck after you attack. Really interesting with a whole lot of things. And I only gave it 4 stars instead of 5 stars. It's kind of comparable to old Boogie Down, maybe a little slower. Um, Now the issue is that Hunter maybe kind of wants to run these smaller minions like Costume Singer. That's just a 1/1. You aren't really happy summoning a 1/1. So that's why I gave it a 4 star in case you wanted to run a deck that didn't use this, that had some other one drop that you really wanted. But I do think this is a spectacular card, particularly with Catch of the Day, a one cost 3/3 rush beast that summons a 2/1 worm for your opponent. You summon it off a fishing rod and you negate that negative battle cry. So Catch of the Day seems really interesting. It's kind of mediocre on its own, but with these summoning effects, with these repeat effects, it can be really good. Now, as for other one cost cards, you have Miracle Salesman, you have Vicious Slither Spear. There's a lot of, it doesn't even have to be uh, necessarily a huge statted minion. It can just be a regular statted minion, and that's okay with you, right? You can combo things like this with like Amalgam. In Priest, you can be comboing this with Clergy and Automaton, though I'll talk about that in the Priest video. I think there's a lot of applications for Fishing Rod, and I think it's really good. And then finally, Pet Parrot, 2 cost 1/1 beast that says Battlecry. Repeat the last 1 cost minion, 1 cost card you played, so that's a big deal. So you can repeat this Catch of the Day for free. You can repeat your regular 1 drop if you want to curve out. And so where this gets really interesting is with these kind of discounted 1 cost cards. So something like Mixologist, which is that Kazakist callback that makes your custom potion, your 1 cost custom potion. You can repeat that. You can repeat the any miniaturized card. So there's a lot of applications that Pet Parrot has. I do think that it's not great on curve. It's only 1/1 stats extra for an extra 1 mana compared to whatever 1 cost card you already played. So it's not really great on curve, but I think that there's a lot of applications that you can kind of cheat with it. Um, that make it really interesting for deck building. And then finally, Parrot Sanctuary is a location. It's a 2 cost 3 durability location. That says your next Battlecry minion costs 1 less. So 3 discounts, and then after you play a Battlecry minion, reopen this. So this is really interesting because it lets you cheat a lot. Not only can you play like a Catch of the Day for free, a Pet Parrot for 1 mana, you can set this up on 2, redo it on turn 4, and then all of a sudden you have a turn 4 Agromar. All of a sudden you have a turn 4 Mukla. You can place in just any 6 cost Battle Cry on turn 4. If you want to really hold it, you can play a 9 cost card on turn 6, right? So there's a lot of interesting applications for this card that lets you cheat. There's a lot of these cards that want you to play multiple cards in the turn that Parrot Sanctuary can really set up. And so I'm really excited for this card. And even if you're just playing regularly, this is just 2 cost, set up 3 discounts for you later in the game, which is always going to be powerful, right? And then last we have my one of my favorite legendaries in the set, Sasquatch. 7 cost 4/5 beast Battlecry. Repeat each card you played last turn. And there's quite a lot of synergies with that text box. So you want to be really making sure that you're not just playing a regular 6 drop because that isn't really a huge amount of tempo. You want to really abuse this effect because there are some times where this isn't going to be worth it. I don't want you guys to think that this is just like a amazing effect every single time. You're not going to be repeating battle cries. You're not going to be targeting things. So you have to make sure that you kind of set up your turns accordingly and be aware when you're playing Sasquatch of what you're going to be trying to set up, right? So first off, I just got some neutral cards that are really good with it. You want to play like discounted cards are really good. Cards that do a lot for a little mana that you can set up beforehand, right? So something like Gorgon Zormu, where you front load that 3 mana. Something like Marin the Manager, you front load that 7 mana, and then you play a powerful card like this Cheese that summons minions. A fantastic treasure off of Marin. Like Marin is actually really powerful. You can Marin into Wondrous Wand, and then Wondrous Wand into a bunch of free cards, and then repeat all that with Sasquatch, which is really, really exciting to think about. Mixologist is another card. You play your 1 cost card, you weave in all your other things, and you get extra value. Same thing with Grifta. And then Concierge, like I was saying before, you have that combo with your Cup of Muscle, and you can get a whole bunch of hand buffs that way with Concierge, and so that's pretty interesting. You choose even a pirate, so you can draw her off of all you can eat, and Sasquatch off of the Beast tag. So pretty interesting. And then finally, Ziliax. If you want to play just a whole bunch of minions on one turn, you can play the Ziliax that discounts based on how many minions are in play, the ticking. Catch of the Day synergizes with that as well because it summons a minion for your opponent. And so you can play a whole bunch of minions, get a whole board. If they clear it, then use Sasquatch for another huge board. And that's really powerful. And then for Hunter cards, we got Mantle Shaper, like I said before. You play it for 0. You play both your Mantle Shapers if you want, plus some other cards. And then you can repeat it again with Sasquatch the next turn. You can play Mystery Egg, get a discounted Sasquatch, get a discounted Big Beast, weave in some other stuff. And then that'll be a really powerful play. Mr. Mukla just as a curve play. You can play Mr. Mukla on turn 10. You can play Agrimar on turn 10. On turn 6, I should say. You can play Mr. Mukla or Agrimar, although Agrimar isn't as good because you're not getting the Battle Cry. But Mr. Mukla is just a great 6-cost card to curve into Sasquatch if you don't want to do anything fancy. You just want to play your 6-cost card into your 7-cost card on curve. More cards that have you front load some mana, like Patchwork Pals and Titan Forge Traps, are going to do really well with Sasquatch. And then lastly, Stranglethorn Heart. If you want to play this big beast hunter with Mystery Egg and Mr. Mukla, Sasquatch does great in there because not only is Stranglethorn Heart going to re-summon the Sasquatch if you had played it earlier, but you can Sasquatch after Stranglethorn Heart to get another board should your opponent have cleared your first Stranglethorn Heart. So that gives you kind of an extra win condition against those control matchups if you can get Sasquatch first. So that's really interesting. A lot of deck building, a lot of planning with Sasquatch that makes it really exciting and an easy 5 stars for me. And I think it's going to be even better in Priest, right? So just a couple decks. There's a whole bunch of things. A whole bunch of mid-range piles. I'm sure there's a Reno pile there you can make, some hand buff piles you can make. But I wanted to make the fun stuff, the exciting stuff for me. So for me, what I wanted to do was make an amalgam deck, which is adaptive amalgam, along with all these different hand buff synergies, all these different buff synergies. If you don't remember what Adaptive Amalgam does, it is a 1-cost 1/2 with all minion types that has Death Rattle. Shuffle this into your deck. It keeps any enchantments. So what you can do is you can use all these tribal enchantments like Sailboat Captain, give it Wind Fury. You can magnetize these hand buff cards like Bronze Gatekeeper, Absorbent Parasite to give it Rush. And then you can play Always a Bigger Jormungandr, give it this kind of cleaving attack, or this trample effect, I should say, if you're a Magic player. And then you just continue to trade into your opponent's stuff and get damage into their face by doing that. So really exciting card that has a whole bunch of applications, especially in Hunter. So I'm really excited to play that deck. And then you also have your all you can eat to draw all your combo pieces. You draw your Amalgam, you draw your Gatekeeper, your Sailboat Captain, your whatever, and it's pretty powerful. And then on the right here we have this kind of spell hunter deck, I should say, where you're using your bunch of bananas and things like that um, to replay it, and then you play all you can eat. You can draw your Mantle Shapers, you can draw your Gorgon Zormu, you can draw your Pet Parrot, stuff like that, and it makes for a huge play, and then you play your Sasquatch and you replay all that the next turn. So really exciting stuff. I think Hunter got a great set, a whole bunch of filler cards and some really interesting and exciting deck building cards that make you excited to look at what you can do. So really excited for Hunter. Like I said, a whole bunch of different avenues that you can take. Um, Not a huge fan of Gilly being just absolutely terrible, and kind of shoehorning you into not wanting to run warrior cards. But I'm very excited to use all you can eat. I'm very excited to plan my turns with Sasquatch. And I think that Hunter got something that's really, really thought provoking when building and playing. So, like I said, thank you very much for listening. Let me know what class you guys want to do next, and I'll see you next time.